whether it's with their brand or even just them's, maybe not so much from a individual level, but to an extent, yes. But they still might be a little bit anxious about, being authentic and doing so. So what would you guys say are some recommendations you have, like moving forward, even on a brand perspective? Like, what are maybe some good approaches they can do, because they might not necessarily have all the resources and everything to what they want to commit to right now, if they feel it's appropriate?
As in how they can support the movement, but not necessarily just like write a whole brand statement.
Exactly.
Right. So I think in those cases, if it's like something you're uncomfortable with or something you just want to do silently, like you can definitely, as a brand, just support it by signal boosting other devs and making sure that you're spreading the resources that there's a ton on Twitter that are really knowledgeable. Just make sure you read them first and make sure you sort of fact check them. We'll always put that out there. And that being said, it's like, I don't know when this episode of the podcast is coming out, but we're like, let's say a week after the whole, like not even the height of it. I would say like when people first started talking about it, whenever this podcast comes out, it's like, are you still supporting these devs? Are you still trying to talk about what's happening? Are you still trying to link resources? Are you still trying to signal boost Black game developers? It's one of those things where even now I can see that, people are talking about it less, which is fine. Like, it's sort of how social media works. I don't think we can change that. But that being said, it's like when, let's say, I'm tweeting out a game or an article that we've written that has traction, I'm like also attaching to it, like, hey, by the way, this is still going on. You can donate here or check out this resource, or still trying my best to signal boost other developers that may need it, and making it an ongoing thing, especially when it's not trending, like we said.
Yeah. And I think the cool thing that you were mentioning here, it's like, regardless of when this podcast goes live or whenever you as a listener are listening to it, it's still going to be important to be aware of. And it even goes further beyond than what this, Black Lives Matter and this current movement is. It goes on to, like we've been talking about since the beginning of this conversation, just inclusion as a whole, and everything. And just, I think you can just allow to see this in different scopes or in different lights, how it's applicable to anything. So but like you said, Victoria, definitely, doing what you can to boost those signals, check the information that you're reading, and just and be on top of it. If that's all you can do right now and everything, then that's perfectly fine. And I think people need to understand that too. It's like, you don't need to make tons of progress towards something or drop everything and doing it. It's just about having the intent and however you can do it, and that's appropriate for you.
I would also, especially since we're talking about the timeline, right? And when people will have kind of our words, and will they still be as relevant then? Right. I think we talk about social responsibility of any kind. The most important thing to know is that it is going to come down to kind of a combination of introspection and like fundamental change. Like, you have to be able to, and I think willing to, kind of even upend your own view system to kind of take a look at the state of your studio, your team, yourself. Is the way that you're behaving or the things that you're doing, are they fundamentally helping to propel, marginalized groups and are you kind of representing the ideal that the movement you're supporting is looking to? And so I think even beyond kind of the donations and the activism piece, like, social responsibility is something that, if you truly believe in it, you should be trying to live every single day.
Yeah, definitely. And what's really interesting, and I know some people listening are probably like, wow, this is kind of a little bit of a departure from what you guys are normally talking about. And while that may be the case a little bit, it's still important. But to bring it back, everything that Victoria mentioned about her community and what they share and inclusion and everything, if you really think about it, it's almost the same thing. Yes, the application is different, but at the end of the day, what we're discussing here and how you can move forward with those things and everything and really bring up, whether it's your own community or not, what we're talking about and discussing is really going to carry over. And as Mustafa was saying on the social end of things too, it's really going to benefit us as a whole, everyone. And you can still apply these what we're discussing here with those other areas as well too. It totally. I just see this just going back to what we were saying before. And whenever you talk about community development and everything, it still goes back to having those core values of inclusion and why, like, the whole, that approach is really going to be the best way that you can succeed at everything that you do. I mean, that's at least what I've always believed in.
And a bonus, it makes people like you more.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I guess it also makes some people dislike you more, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right. Well, as we start drawn to a close here, I'd love for us to, talk a little bit more about just some lessons learned, Victoria, from your own experiences from in light of, what has been going on recently, but also, and maybe relating it to a little bit in some cases, with your community. So like, what have been some results that you've been seeing with your initiatives for inclusion?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's been a lot of things, and I think a lot of it is kind of cumulative. It's like small things that kind of start to add up. For example, the Kitfox community needs so little moderation. And I mean, we're not that small. Our Discord is 6,000 people. And our Twitter following at this point is like 20K, I think. And it needs very, very little moderation from me. And that's honestly such a lifeline, especially when you're in indie, to not have to feel like, oh no, if I leave them alone or if I go to an event, like something's going to blow up. Like, it's usually fine. Nothing usually ever happens, which is great in that case. But speaking even from, I guess, like a financial success point of view, because, at the end of the day, we are trying to survive by making games. Having diverse games, having diverse voices in the industry means we've actually captured, I think, a lot of new people who are really interested in games and who didn't really know that there was a space for them. For example, Mondo Museum is a game about building museums, and a lot of museum people who say they've never touched games in ages are suddenly like, wait a minute, I want this game. And they're telling like all their friends, they're telling their classes, they're telling the museum coworkers that they have. I now know a lot of museum people really randomly because they would share it with them. And they're really passionate about having a game that kind of connects with them, and having a game basically appeal to your experiences and appeal to your interests is what's so exciting about games. I think it's being able to either explore a new world but still feel connected to it, or I guess like in Animal Crossing, just have a world where you feel comfortable in. So I think, especially considering games, when you have more people interested in it in like a consumer sense, it's like, yeah, that means more sales. And that's kind of part of it. And not having a space where it is relegated to like, like gamers are only 14-year-old boys who yell your mom jokes at their like screen while they're shooting you or something. Like having that definition expand can only do good for the industry, for sure, and being inclusive is part of that.
Yeah, I absolutely love your example there with was it Mondo Museum? That like that's it's just it just I think says it so perfectly, because it's just a very simple concept where it's like people who've never played games before. And that's the part that I love the most, is hearing about people who've never played games before, and now they're not just playing them, they're sharing it with others because they're included. And from a creator perspective, like a developer, like that can't be any more rewarding, I think, than in itself. And then obviously, to benefit financially, it would be, icing on the cake, so to speak. But still, just to have that ability to create something to include someone who's never been part of that before, it just speaks volumes. So thank you so much for sharing that example, because I think that was a perfect one. And just, you can change whatever that game is, whatever that group of people is, and include them, and you can still create that same positive outlook, just that positive, great overall feeling from everybody else involved.
Definitely.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for that lesson and everything, from what you learned in your experiences and stuff too. All right. So we definitely covered a lot today, but in light of this, what would you say are some closing thoughts or suggestions that you would have for our audience about this subject and ways we can do our part? I know we mentioned some of them earlier, but if you could briefly summarize just a few of those for our listeners, that'd be appreciative.
Yeah. So I think like my big thought piece to like go away with this is, I would love it if all of us started to more critically engage with the industry we're in. I think games for so long have had success being at this happy medium, and the fact that things are changing and maybe it is uncomfortable and maybe it is scary, like in its own way, that's good because it means we're moving forward. And it's how I feel about rejection. It's like you're being rejected because you're playing at your upper limits. So I want us to continue playing at our upper limits and seeing how we can improve the industry and not just be stuck with a place where other people are put down so that we can succeed. And whether we see that with brands making statements and people continuing to support causes even when it's not a trending topic, or in the marketing sense, for example, being more mindful of how we share things, what gets signal boosted, how we build our own communities. I think that will have lasting impacts, maybe that we won't see today, but in the future. And maybe that's also like its own grand thing, like, oh, we're going to change the world in the future. Maybe not, but the fact that you can maybe make someone's life like a little bit better, like tomorrow or a month from now, I think is just perfect.
Awesome. Yeah. Sorry, what'd you say, Mustafa?
I said, couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing else that needs to be said. Just like you said, Victoria, more critically engaged with the industry.
Yeah.
And how you paraphrased everything else after that's perfect. So thank you. Yeah, that's our closing thought. So if there's one suggestion she had, that was it. So there we have it.
We're done. All right, cancel games forever.
All right. Well, Victoria, this is great. We really appreciate your time and everything with us on the podcast. But before you go, please, what's the best way that people can learn more about Kitfox Games, your upcoming projects, and connect with you if they would like to?
Yeah, so you can find Kitfox at kitfoxgames.com. We're also on Twitter at Kitfox Games and basically everywhere at Kitfox Games, including TikTok, strangely enough. I'm on that boat right now. And yeah, if you want to find me, I'm on Twitter at the Tran.
Okay. Well, there you have it, guys. Again, Victoria, thank you so much for being such a great guest and sharing your insights with us. And we really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone, and thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. A special thanks to Taisuke Kimura for creating the show's theme and Donnie Wilson for the logo design. If you enjoy and value the content, you can support us by visiting our Patreon, which is patreon.com/IGM podcast, and select the tier that meets your needs. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com/the number of this episode. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company